rural areas tend to have more people that are small business owners, percentage-wise, and also that are farmers and ranchers. So this is not a December thing, this is not a January thing, this is a now thing, because those premiums are hitting when, on November 1st, when that market opens up. So right now, millions of Americans are staring down the reality that their health care premiums could double. For many families, that will mean making impossible choices to make ends meet or losing coverage altogether. This is preventable, but we have to act now. Over 20 million Americans are enrolled in Affordable Care Act health insurance plan. If we don't act, they're going to be forced to make impossible decisions. And that doubling number, that the premiums are going to double, came out of a study just this week by the Kaiser Family Foundation. If Congress doesn't come together in a bipartisan way to extend these credits, these families, farmers, ranchers, small business owners, entrepreneurs, seniors, people living in rural communities, will have to pay an average of double every month, hundreds of dollars more every month, not every year, every month, to keep their health insurance. In Minnesota, nearly 90,000 people will see their premiums increase by double digits. So you can say, well, I'm not on that kind of health care. I work in such and such company. You don't know the day, especially with these tariffs, when people are starting to get laid off at manufacturing companies like John Deere, or that a farmer's business goes bankrupt, his farm goes bankrupt because bankruptcies for small farms are at an all-time high in the last 5 years. You don't know when it's going to be you. It's like the lottery, especially right now with the crazy things going on in this economy. So even for people that aren't on the Affordable Care Act, this affects them. For many, this will put health care coverage out of reach. This is not political theater, I say to the president after he posted that offensive video. This is not a joke. These are real Americans that are facing these challenges. The loss of this tax credit will raise premiums for everyone. Minnesotans have already started to receive notice that their costs will increase. One constituent is bracing for more than a 27% increase in their premium next year. Another, whose husband's job was just eliminated, called the 19% increase in health insurance costs their family is facing incomprehensible with the loss of income that they already faced. And this is before adding in the extra cost people will be forced to take on if the tax credits are not extended. So if you noticed, I use those words 19 and 20, and you're thinking, well, she just said they double. This is before that happens. This is what's happening on the market right now because of a number of factors going on that the president should be dealing with. And people are going to be socked with this, smacked with this, right while the price of groceries has been going up. I think the president promised he was going to bring costs down on day one, and we're in something like day 255. And the opposite is happening. Anyone that goes in a grocery store and walks out, looks at their receipt, knows exactly what I'm talking about. Or people that are in the grocery aisle and see the cost of beef, they know what I'm talking about. Or people that get their electricity bill, they know what I'm talking about. Those aren't deep fakes. Those aren't fake videos the president puts up on Truth Social. Those are real bills. So especially as this is going on because of these tariffs, and could I just add, since I have the floor here, the latest, the tariffs on sofas and cabinets and lumber, it is already too expensive for Americans to buy a house or to rent a house or to rent an apartment. And now we're going to see major increases to home furnishings. And while we are in the middle of a housing crisis, it's literally one of the worst things he could do right now, but he did it. So all that is not nothing. All that kind of sets the stage for why the healthcare cost, which is one of the most expensive for people just on a yearly basis, is so devastating. One of my constituents shared that while they'd planned for higher premiums, they didn't expect a more than $2,000 increase for the same coverage next year. And like so many others, they were concerned that even if they switched to a cheaper plan, you know how that is, you're betting and you're trying to guess and estimate what's going to go wrong in your family, and is your kid going to have some kind of surgery or break a leg? Is your husband going to have some kind of health care checkup that'll be expensive? You got to always calculate those things. Like so many others, again, they were thinking, well, should I switch to a cheaper plan to save money and then hope I don't get sick? And then they would be more exposed to higher costs. Those are the kind of things people are doing right now. It's like the woman that Jean Shaheen had at a spotlight forum that we did this last week who had MS, and she had actually talked to her doctor about whether she could ration, kind of like people used to do with insulin with diabetes before we put those caps on insulin. Could she ration her medication for MS? And the doctor says, no, that's not how this works. It'll just grow the pressure in your brain and make your symptoms worse. Another Minnesotan wrote me that without the tax credits, their family of 4 would have to downgrade their health plan and spend significantly more on their health insurance than they do on their mortgage. Another said that he expected his family would have to pay an additional $16,000 per year for their health coverage if they had no health care tax credits. One Minnesotan shared, I cannot absorb additional costs and will be forced into a catastrophic plan if these reported double-digit increases go into effect. Just because someone can't afford to stay insured doesn't mean they need health care less. One of the things that I learned that maybe I hadn't thought through when I went to these rural hospitals was the fact that because there's a high percentage of these farmers and people in small towns on these plans, ours is called MNsure, like I said, they're already hit by the Medicaid cuts, right, the hospitals, the Medicare cuts, because it's an older population. But they actually cared a lot about this, the doctors, the nurses, the people running the hospitals, because they know that the people won't be able to afford this if these premiums double. They will choose not to get health care insurance. And then what will happen is they'll end up in their emergency rooms with hospitals that are already strapped thin, and they won't be able to afford, they will treat them, but they won't be able to afford it for a long period of time. So they time and time again mentioned to me that these affordable tax credits expiring or not being maintained would create a major problem. Already, approximately 1/3 of Americans report not taking medications as prescribed due to the costs. Jason from Pennsylvania was able to get life-saving coverage when he was diagnosed with thyroid cancer through the Affordable Care Act marketplace, and he said, it's only because of the premium tax credits that I've been able to afford that coverage. Now faced with the expiration of these credits, he understands the consequences for people like him. He said, if you're faced with a choice of bankruptcy or debt or saving your life, you're probably going to choose your life, Jason said. But the consequences of that, of having an immense amount of debt the rest of your life, could be ruined because of that. Another cancer survivor who has always made health insurance a priority also fears that unaffordable health insurance could mean for patients like her. And she says, it means that I don't have to wait around to find out about a disease that could have been cured if it had been detected soon enough. The insurance means I don't have to forego my entire life savings in my home because of medical bills. I don't have to forego life-saving treatment because I can't afford it, and that's all about to change. Without the tax credit, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford health care, the kind of health care that's going to save my life. Already, as I noted, because of Medicaid cuts that were passed in the big, beautiful betrayal of a bill, more than 300 rural hospitals, 200 health centers, and 500 nursing homes are likely to close. This means less accessible care for rural communities, longer drives to access care, fewer places to seek care in an emergency, and more hours taken from work, caregiving, or other responsibilities. Fewer patients will go to that doctor's visit or get that life-saving screening. They will not get the surgeries they need. Many will get sicker. And ultimately, as I noted, more patients are going to end up in the emergency room, where these hospitals are going to have to take on the additional burden of more uncompensated care. None of this happens in a vacuum. As I noted, these Medicaid cuts And Medicaid provides health care for at least 1 in 5 rural Minnesotans, more than 31% of children in our state, and more than half of all nursing home residents across our state. So this is about seniors, people with disabilities, and kids, and that's why Medicaid's so important. For me, my dad, in his later years, got late onset Alzheimer's, and he was in one place, and then we moved him to another place. But I knew the exact date when his savings were going to go away. And we were going into those savings, and sadly, we lost him. But I knew that exact date, because I was going to have to move him to another nursing home, another assisted living that took Medicaid, and I made plans with them. I knew that date. So many people in this country know that date, even if they're not a senior relying on Medicaid. Their kids, their spouses, their grandkids kind of know when that savings, if they had any savings to begin with, is going to run out. So Medicaid goes way beyond the individuals who have no savings at all. It actually helps people that do have some savings. It helps people that have worked their lives through, like my dad. Medicaid is there as a safety net for people. Over the last few months, I've heard from thousands of constituents, including seniors in Minnesota, from Sunrise Village in Malacca that I visited, to senior living in Watkins or Winona, to the Pillars at Prospect Park, and Episcopal homes in the metro. They are worried about their health care. I heard from one constituent from Inver Grove Heights who told me that Medicaid helps her to afford the cost of her father's memory care. I think about what a constituent told me who works with adults with disabilities. She is a mental health therapist for a woman who had a tracheotomy and is wheelchair-bound who requires nursing care. She's also the aunt of a man with Down syndrome with many needs who's in a residential home. She said, "I'm concerned about the possible Medicaid service cuts to the people who most need it." I've also heard from a constituent named Lola, whose daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. A social worker advised Lola that her employer-based insurance may not cover the cancer treatments her daughter needed and connected her with Medicaid. She said Medicaid helped completely with the surgeries, the T-cell therapy. Lola said using my own insurance would have caused a lot of delays because it would not have covered what she needed. And Robbie, who after years in an adult foster care facility now lives independently with a roommate because of Medicaid's disability waiver and community-based services. I've got to meet some of these incredible Minnesotans visiting care providers who help people with disabilities, thinking about the progress we've made so people can either live at their home or they can live in a group home and they can have jobs, and we just can't go backwards. People will feel the impacts of these cuts, and we know it. And I'll close with this. After learning that her insurance cost is set to skyrocket next year, a woman asked, "What can you in the Senate do to make sure I don't have to stop getting my insurance?" We can do something, and it's something that so many of my colleagues agree with, especially after the cuts that were made, especially after the bludgeoning tariffs, what they're doing to the cost of things for people. It's not going to fix everything, that's for sure, but it's going to save a lot of lives, and it's going to help people contain costs so they don't go over that cliff. As Minnesota's former senator, I have his desk, Hubert Humphrey once said, "The moral test of government isn't just how it treats the young and healthy. It's also how it treats the sick, the elderly, and people with disabilities." That's definitely true for us right now. And I believe this is a moral test for all Americans. At a time when so many families are struggling just to make ends meet, we can't sit back here and just play a blame game and look at the polls and We can do something. It's really pretty simple. We must work to protect Americans' access to health care. We must protect our rural hospitals. We must address our health care crisis. As I know, it's not a December or January problem, it's a now problem. And it's completely within our grasp to do this. And it's certainly within the president's grasp to bring his party with him. So stop, Mr. President, posting those fake offensive videos and start helping Americans with their health care. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate resume legislative session and be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand adjourned until 11:30 a.m. on Friday, October the 3rd, that following the prayer and pledge, the journal proceedings be approved today, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for the two leaders be reserved for the use later in the day, morning business be closed, and notwithstanding Rule 22, the Senate proceed to executive session and resume consideration of SRS 412 post-cloture, and that all post-closure time be expired at 1:30 p.m.
Without objection.
Mr. President, for the information of my colleagues, senators should expect a series of votes at 1:30 p.m. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 11:30 a.m. tomorrow.
In this chamber. So Republicans need to negotiate with us. And Speaker Johnson's got to get his people here. If anyone wanted evidence as to who wanted this shutdown, just look at the fact that Johnson does not even have the House in session. When Democrats had the White House, the Senate, and the House, when Democrats had the majority in this chamber, when I was majority leader, we never had one shutdown in 4 years, not one. You know why? Because we worked with our Republican colleagues to find a way to keep the government funded. We did this 13 times, as Leader Thune likes to remind everyone. That's a lot of bipartisan negotiation, but not this time, not so today. Republicans need to negotiate. Today is October 1st, and that means something else is happening today. Americans throughout the country are opening their mailboxes and finding letters in there telling them that their health insurance is about to go way, way, way up. The other day, we thought it was about $400 a month that the average American family would pay more in insurance premiums. But it turns out it's even worse than that. A Kaiser report, a nonpartisan, well-respected Kaiser report from yesterday says it's on average of $1,000 a month, and God forbid, even much more for so many Americans. Healthcare premiums, because of what the Republicans have done, is going up 114% a year on average. The average premium is going to more than double. What's the average American family supposed to do with that? What happens on Friday night when the family sits around the kitchen table and says, how are we going to pay the bills, when they see that their insurance could be $1,000 more a month? Health insurance, vital to the parents, the children of the family. What are they going to do? The average American can't afford $1,000 a month or even $400 a month without cutting back on their health care or cutting back on something else that's vital. You know, Mr. President, Americans are saying the #1 issue is cost. They now rate Donald Trump worse on costs than they rated Joe Biden, and he didn't have very good ratings. It's the tariffs. It's the change in electricity costs because of what they've done with the cheapest and cleanest source of energy and putting electrons on the grid, which is solar. They got rid of it in their fanatical hatred of clean energy, and now they're putting money into coal. It's incredible. Because of costs of groceries, of meat. But the number one increase in cost now, on October 1st, is healthcare costs. And it's the average American is going to say, what the heck happened here? And we Democrats are going to be there every day, every hour. Senate, House, groups that care about healthcare, hospital groups, healthcare groups, research groups, and letting them know this didn't have to happen. It happened because our Republican colleagues wanted to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut their health care. It's incredible. It is incredible. 3 times we asked our Republican colleagues to extend the ACA tax credit. 3 times they voted no. Well, it's not too late. They could change. When I met with the president, he seemed not to know the magnitude of the crisis, and he said, oh, this is going to hurt me. Well, it sure will. But it's going to hurt every American. What's motivating Democrats, what's motivating me, is simply to take this burden off the shoulders of tens of millions of American families who struggle each week to pay the bills, and they don't need this huge increase in something as vital as health insurance. And the Republicans sort of know this. So what do? They make up lies, absolute lies. They say, oh, what they're fighting to do is prevent, they say, illegal immigrants from getting federal health care dollars. That is a damn lie. Not $1 of Medicare, Medicaid, or ACA is allowed to go to undocumented immigrants, not $1. So why do they keep saying this? This seems to be their theme, because they're afraid to talk about the real issue. It's typical Republican response. Have a diversion, try to scare people emotionally. But I'll tell you, to the average American family, that $1,000 a month increase or that $400 a month increase on their health care bills means a lot more than political crap put in the air, lies, by our Republican colleagues. So I was very glad this morning that some of the commentators on TV said that. When they say that undocumented immigrants are going to get this money, it's a lie, plain and simple. It's a lie so lazy and so outlandish it's easy to rebut. But again, let me be clear. Undocumented people cannot and will not receive premium tax credit by law. The federal government does not fund federal health insurance for undocumented immigrants in Medicaid or Medicare, period, full stop. So they don't care. Why? Because they know the American people are on our side, and they know they're going to get angrier and angrier starting today when they see these health care bills. Listen to this poll. A Kaiser Family Foundation poll found a whopping 75% of Americans support extending the ACA premium tax credit, including 63% of Republicans. When our Republican Senate and House colleagues go around their communities, of course, the House isn't even here this week, as I mentioned, they're going to hear it in the barbershops, in the restaurants, in the diners, and at the Little Leagues, and at the Veterans Halls, because it's so shocking people are going to be talking about it. They'll see. And we Democrats are going to be there relentlessly letting people know why it happened. Because our Republican colleagues did not want to help us out of this crisis. Instead, they wanted to give the dollars to billionaires. President Trump calls what the Democrats want radical. President Trump, it is not radical to say Americans deserve lower health care premiums. It is not radical to say we want to prevent the average American family from getting these huge increases, those on ACA, $1,000 a month. When Democrats say we want to work with Republicans to lower premiums, to strengthen health care, all we are doing is reflecting what the American people already want. Nothing more, nothing less. They want us to sit down and negotiate something real that takes this huge, huge burden off their shoulders. And Donald Trump, instead of acting like an adult, he's the most immature president we have ever had. Instead of doing something to stop the health care crisis, is threatening to hurt countless hardworking Americans. Let me repeat the quote Donald Trump said yesterday. We can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible. They're bad for them and irreversible, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things they like, cutting programs they like. Donald Trump says it loud and clear. That's one thing about him. He is using the American people as pawns, threatening pain on the country as blackmail. Well, that's not going to work. The American people, it's so easy to see through those tactics. They know this is the Trump shutdown. They know Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, and the House. And what is done during the shutdown will fall squarely on the Republicans' back. Donald Trump even says it. He says he is going to close down all these things people want. It's going to fall right on his back. The American people will know who's doing it, and he's going to have to recoil from it, just as they have done so many cuts already, even before October 1st. And they had to back off on many of them, some because of the courts, but some because of public outcry, such as the huge cutbacks they made in the VA. Well, Democrats' positions hasn't changed. We're willing, ready, and able to negotiate. We're ready to reopen the government today or do something else that hurts them because they don't have the money. If Republicans work with us and fix America's health care crisis, the shutdown could go away very quickly. And that's what Democrats want, to end this now, fix health care now. To take yes for an answer. Yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Republican Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, here we are. Democrats have bowed to the far left, and they've shut down the federal government. As of this morning, critical federal employees, including members of the military, Border Patrol agents, and air traffic controllers, are working without pay. And a number of government services are unavailable or at risk. Mr. President, Democrats are well aware of the damage of a government shutdown. We've heard it from them time and time again. But apparently, none of that matters to Democrats today. All that seems to matter is that their far-left base sees them fighting against President Trump. And the American people just have to suffer the consequences. Mr. President, we can end this today. There is a clean, nonpartisan, continuing resolution at the desk. It has no partisan policy writers, no new Republican policies. It just keeps the government running until November the 21st. The House passed it. The President is ready to sign it into law. And the only thing standing in the way is Senate Democrats. We're demanding $1.5 trillion in partisan spending to keep the government open for 7 weeks. That's right. They are demanding more than the defense budget in their resolution to keep the government open for 4 weeks. Mr. President, that's right. They are demanding more than the defense budget in their resolution to keep the government open for 4 weeks. Mr. President, that's not how this works. We were in the situation 13 times when Democrats had the majority under President Biden. And 13 times, Republicans provided more than enough votes to keep the government open. And that's what needs to happen here. We are just one Senate roll call vote away from ending this shutdown. We need a handful of Democrats to join Republicans to reopen the government. And once we do that, then we can talk about the issues that Democrats are raising. But we're not going to engage in bipartisan discussions while Democrats are holding the federal government hostage to their partisan demands. Mr. President, this Democrat shutdown is actually delaying progress on the issues that Democrats claim to be interested in. It's also delaying important work on appropriations bills. Now, I've said throughout this year that my goal is to do appropriations through regular order which allows members of both parties to give voice to their priorities and to help shape appropriations bills. And we've made good progress already this year. Thanks to the work of Chair Collins and the Appropriations Committee, we've passed 3 bipartisan bills before the August recess for the first time since 2018. And there are a number of additional bills ready for floor consideration. But that work is now delayed because we have to deal with the Democrat shutdown mess. Mr. President, how long this shutdown lasts depends entirely on Democrats. Republicans are united around a clean, nonpartisan funding extension. A few Democrats joined us last night and voted to keep the government open. They'll have another opportunity to vote today. And I hope more of our Democrat colleagues will agree to end this shutdown. Real people are suffering right now because of Democrats' temper tantrum. And it needs to stop. Mr. President, I want to close with this. In 2019, in the midst of another shutdown, the Democrat leader urged reopening the government before negotiating on the one point of disagreement. He said then, and I quote, "Why must we hold millions of Americans who depend on the services of these agencies that are closed, hundreds of thousands of workers who get paid by these agencies, why must we hold them hostage? Why must a temper tantrum determine how we vote and what happens in this government? Everyone can shut down the government on anything, any leader, any president. It is not the way to do things." End quote. Well, Mr. President, I hope that the Democrat leader will heed his own words Democrats need to reopen the government, and we need to get back to work for the American people. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alston-Brooks.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senate Democrats have now dragged us into the Schumer shutdown. When I say us, I mean all of us as Americans. Didn't have to happen. And it certainly doesn't need to continue. Americans are overwhelmingly against the shutdown of our government. New polling from the New York Times and Siena just came out, and the polling proves it. Here's the key finding. 2 out of 3 Americans believe that Democrats should not shut down the government, even if they don't get their $1 trillion ransom fee paid, which, of course, they won't. Only 47% of the Democrats support a shutdown. That's not even a majority of Democrats. Senate Democrats are on the wrong side of Republicans, they're on the wrong side of independents, and they're on the wrong side of their own party. There is only one good option to reopen the government, and that option is a bipartisan, clean, continuing resolution that we will vote on this morning. The House already passed it with bipartisan support. President Trump is ready to sign it. Senate Republicans voted yesterday in an attempt to pass it. It failed yesterday, and we're going to offer it again today. All it takes to reopen the government is cooperation from just 5 more Senate Democrats. We picked up 3 Democrats last night, so there are clearly cracks on their side of the aisle and movement towards our side. That will continue. We are ready to vote for it again and again and again to make sure we can reopen the government for the American people. And there is bipartisan, broad bipartisan support to open the government. That's what the New York Times revealed, and that's what the vote revealed last evening. 5 more Democrats join us today. The shutdown is over. Because remember, it takes 60 votes in the Senate to get something like this passed and accomplished. And all we're asking is to reopen the government for the next 7 weeks. Democrats supported these same funding levels before. Now they claim the levels aren't good enough. Democrats are now demanding $1.5 trillion in new spending for just reopening the government for 4 short weeks. That's $48 billion of new spending each and every day of the 4 weeks in the Democrats' proposal. This is a direct attack on hardworking American taxpayers who voted against wasteful Washington spending in the elections in November. Think back to previous continuing resolutions just like this one. You can think back to 13 of them during the time Joe Biden was in office at the White House. 13 of these passed. The minimum number of votes was 65. We voted to keep the government open, bipartisan. When Joe Biden and Barack Obama were president, Democrats said shutdowns were dangerous, destructive, and desperate. That's the word of the Democrats. Dangerous, destructive, desperate. Listen to those words. Listen to what Chuck Schumer said. He said, passing a clean CR would avert a harmful and unnecessary government shutdown. He also said if a government shuts down, it'll be average Americans who suffer the most. But yesterday, he stood here in the well and then voted to shut down the government.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senate Democrats have now dragged us into the Schumer shutdown. When I say us, I mean all of us as Americans. Didn't have to happen. And it certainly doesn't need to continue. Americans are overwhelmingly against the shutdown of our government. New polling from the New York Times and Siena just came out, and the polling proves it. Here's the key finding. 2 out of 3 Americans believe that Democrats should not shut down the government, even if they don't get their $1 trillion ransom fee paid, which, of course, they won't. Only 47% of the Democrats support a shutdown. That's not even a majority of Democrats. Senate Democrats are on the wrong side of Republicans, they're on the wrong side of independents, and they're on the wrong side of their own party. There is only one good option to reopen the government, and that option is a bipartisan, clean, continuing resolution that we will vote on this morning. The House already passed it with bipartisan support. President Trump is ready to sign it. Senate Republicans voted yesterday in an attempt to pass it. It failed yesterday, and we're going to offer it again today. All it takes to reopen the government is cooperation from just 5 more Senate Democrats. We picked up 3 Democrats last night, so there are clearly cracks on their side of the aisle and movement towards our side. That will continue. We are ready to vote for it again and again and again to make sure we can reopen the government for the American people. And there is bipartisan, broad bipartisan support to open the government. That's what the New York Times revealed, and that's what the vote revealed last evening. 5 more Democrats join us today. The shutdown is over. Because remember, it takes 60 votes in the Senate to get something like this passed and accomplished. And all we're asking is to reopen the government for the next 7 weeks. Democrats supported these same funding levels before. Now they claim the levels aren't good enough. Democrats are now demanding $1.5 trillion in new spending for just reopening the government for 4 short weeks. That's $48 billion of new spending each and every day of the 4 weeks in the Democrats' proposal. This is a direct attack on hardworking American taxpayers who voted against wasteful Washington spending in the elections in November. Think back to previous continuing resolutions just like this one. You can think back to 13 of them during the time Joe Biden was in office at the White House. 13 of these passed. The minimum number of votes was 65. We voted to keep the government open, bipartisan. When Joe Biden and Barack Obama were president, Democrats said shutdowns were dangerous, destructive, and desperate. That's the word of the Democrats. Dangerous, destructive, desperate. Listen to those words. Listen to what Chuck Schumer said. He said, passing a clean CR would avert a harmful and unnecessary government shutdown. He also said if a government shuts down, it'll be average Americans who suffer the most. But yesterday, he stood here in the well and then voted to shut down the government. Senator Patty Murray of Washington is the top Democrat on the Senate Appropriations Committee. She has said a shutdown solves nothing. She went on to say, and it hurts everyone. Yesterday, she voted to shut down the government. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts said that a shutdown, quote, is the last resort for those who can't otherwise win their fights through elections and can't win their fights in Congress. Well, yesterday, she voted to shut down the government. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut said, quote, there is a time and a place to debate health care, but not when the funding of the federal government and all the lives that are impacted by it hang in the balance. Well, yesterday, he voted to shut down the government. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota is a member of the Senate Democrat leadership. She said, shutdowns are not good for the economy. Yesterday, she voted to shut down the government. Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii said, I've seen the same thing over and over again. He said, shutdowns don't work, no one wins, but Americans have a lot to lose. Yesterday, he voted to shut down the government. Those were Senate Democrat words when there was a Democrat in the White House. Yet last night, when it mattered, Democrats ignored their own warnings. Either their memories are short or their principles are situational. The costs they describe are now a reality. Border Patrol agents are showing up to work. They're not getting paid. The Border Patrol Union warns that shutdowns threaten their capacity to maintain the most secure border in our nation's history. Veterans' health care is going to be impacted. Low-income families will lose vital benefits to help buy groceries. Republicans are committed to reopening the government with a clean, continuing resolution. That will allow us to finish the appropriations process the right way. Mr. President, when he was Majority Leader, Senator Schumer broke that process, the appropriations process. Last year, the Senate Appropriations Committee passed, the committee, not Chuck Schumer, but that committee passed 11 of 12 appropriations bills, many of them unanimous, always bipartisan. And what happened? Senator Schumer let each and every one of them rot and die in his Senate desk drawer. He shut down the appropriations process, and now he wants to shut down the government. Republicans have restored the appropriations process. For the first time in 4 years, the Senate passed appropriation bills in August, passed 3 of them. Senator Susan Collins of Maine deserves special praise and thanks for this achievement. Passing a clean CR will allow the Senate to finish our bipartisan work. The American people want their government open. They want it reopened. They want it to remain open. They want it working. So today, Democrats are facing a clear choice. They can govern in the best interest of the American people, or they can continue to grandstand for their retweets and their likes from their liberal base. Republicans are united in our commitment to reopen the government. How long it takes, how costly it is, that, Mr. President, is entirely up to the Senate Democrats. A bipartisan offer, a bipartisan bill that already passed the House, is right here in the Senate for a vote today. The President is ready to sign it to reopen the government. It is time to pass the bill today and end this Schumer shutdown. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum calls with respect to calendar number 167, S2882, calendar 168, HR 5371.
Without objection.
I yield the floor.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, it's not even one day after Republicans chose to shut down the government instead of making any sort of progress on stopping health care premiums from skyrocketing. And it is already painfully clear that Republican leadership is not taking any of this seriously. Republican leadership doesn't care if millions of Americans lose their health insurance. Republican leadership does not care if your health care costs go through the roof. And despite a lot of showboating yesterday, Republican leadership obviously doesn't care how long this shutdown is to finally work with Democrats to finalize a solution. If Republican leadership actually cared about reopening the government, House Republicans would actually be here. Let me say that again. House Republicans are not even here. Are we supposed to believe they are taking this seriously? I guess not. And if Republican leadership actually cared about reopening the government, they would be talking with us about how the actual issues we want to address, how to stop skyrocketing health prices, hospital closures, millions of patients from losing their health insurance. Instead, they are screaming illegal immigration and telling bold-faced lies about Democrats' proposal to try and talk about anything but health care. That really gives away the game Republican leaders are playing with the American people, doesn't it? Democrats want Republicans to sit down at the table for a serious negotiation about really serious issues. But Republican leadership is off playing make-believe in la-la land. How are we supposed to negotiate with President Trump when he's busy frying his mind in an AI fantasy world of mariachi bands and science fiction med beds and who knows what next? And how are we supposed to negotiate with Republican leaders when they are refusing to work on a bipartisan path out and just making lies up about our Democratic proposal? For everyone who's only heard the Republican nonsense, let me make our agenda clear. Here's what Democrats actually want to do. We want to stop your health care premiums from doubling next year. We want to stop millions of people from getting priced out of their insurance and getting sick or going without care. We want to stop hospitals from closing. I wonder why Republicans have such a hard time being honest about that. Well, maybe because they caused this healthcare crisis in the first place. And let's be crystal clear. It is not honest for Republicans to try and just say, oh, well, we can just talk about healthcare later. We pinky promise. Rate hikes are being finalized right now. Notices with massive price increases will land in our families' mailboxes this month. Open enrollment starts in a matter of a few weeks. That means families are going to start seeing their premiums double. People are going to get priced out of coverage, that is, unless we act now. There is no waiting. We have been waiting. There is no later. That is too late. Our Republicans say they will not talk about solutions until the damage is done. Are they saying they want to lock in the high health care rates first? You know, the best time to put out a fire is before it burns down the house. Surely Republicans don't need me to tell them that. But if Republicans insist on asking why we can't address health care later, I've got a few questions for them. First off, why the heck couldn't we talk about health care sooner? Huh? Where in the world have you been? You moved heaven and earth to pass new tax breaks for billionaires by cutting over $1 trillion from Americans' health care. Why won't you move a muscle to save health care for our working families? I mean, my goodness, why is it not until there is a shutdown Republican leaders will even say we can at least talk about health care? Oh, but not yet. And if a shutdown is the first time Republican leaders will even acknowledge, in the slightest whisper, the looming health care crisis, why should we trust for 1 second you'll keep your word later? Republicans have been choosing to ignore this health care crisis for months. And now they face another choice. How much longer are they going to insist on this partisan path? How much longer are they going to stick their heads in the sand? Because I will warn them, the American people cannot wait. One family in my state of Washington is about to see their premiums jump from $283 a month to as high as $1,800 a month if Republicans insist on inaction. And I know they're not the only ones. To my Republican colleagues who don't think this is a crisis, to anyone who thinks health care can wait, go out and talk to people. Talk to insurance companies in your states, or doctors, or hospitals, or patients, and then come to the table and talk with us. We are here. We are ready to work on real solutions to address this health care crisis and reopen the government. I've been at the table the whole time. I am here. I am ready. I am willing to work out a real solution to get this done. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 167 S2882, a bill making continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators.
Under previous order, the mandatory quorum call under Rule 22 has been waived. The question is the sense of the Senate that debate on the motion to proceed to S2882, a bill making continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for the purpose shall be brought to close. The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee. Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lemus. Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee. Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lemus. Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Sheehy.
I'm assuming.
Ms. Slotkin. Ms. Smith. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Thune. Mr. Tillis. Mr. Tuberville. Mr. Van Hollen. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warnock. Ms. Warren. Mr. Welch. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Cantwell, Hassan, Murray, Padilla, Peters, Rosen, Shaheen, Smith, and Whitehouse. Senators voting in the negative: Barrasso, Bozeman, Capito, Cornyn, Cotton, Fisher, Graham, Haggerty, Heidsmith, Kennedy, Lemus, Marino, Mullen, Murkowski, Paul, Scott of Florida, Sheehy, and Tuberville. Mr. Schmidt, no. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Sanders, aye. Mr. Wyden, aye.
Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Height-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Barrasso, Britt, Budd, Cornyn, Cortez Masto, Cotton, Kramer, Daines, Ernst, Fetterman, Graham, Grassley, Johnson, Justice, Kennedy, King, Langford, Marshall, McConnell, Moody, Marino, Mullen, Scott of South Carolina, and Sullivan. Ms. Collins, aye. Senators voting in the negative. Mr. Moran, aye. Senators voting in the negative. Blumenthal, Blunt Rochester, Coons, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Kane, Kim, Merkley, Murray, Ossoff, Padilla, Reed, Sanders, Schumer, Slotkin, Warnock, and Welch. Mr. Hawley, aye. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Ms. Brooks, no. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. Cassidy, aye. Mrs. Britt, aye. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Johnson, aye. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Mr. Coons, no. Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mr. Risch, aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 47, and the motion is agreed to. Cloture having been invoked, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Cloture, nomination, Department of Defense, Hung Kao of Virginia to be Undersecretary of the Navy.
Okay.
Now we got a 2-hour clock. Senator from North Carolina.
President, on Saturday, I was in Western North Carolina for the day because that marked the 1-year anniversary of the landfall of Helene, and in a place that a hurricane's never really been before, about 200 miles inland, and the Smoky Mountain range. In North Carolina alone, Mr. President, it had an impact land-wise equivalent to the state of Massachusetts. about a dozen river basins were at historic 100-year flood levels. And the damage was tremendous. The loss of life, 108 people in North Carolina alone, more than 250 people by the storm. $59.6 billion in damages. It's actually the most expensive storm in North Carolina's history, breaking the previous record of $30 billion by Hurricane Florence back in 2018. 74,000 homes damaged or destroyed. 5,000 miles of roads damaged or destroyed, including major portions of I-40, which are still only one lane in each direction for about a 20-mile stretch between North Carolina and Tennessee. I-26 was damaged. Blue Ridge Parkway's just opened up. 848 bridges damaged and destroyed, 20,000 farms and 800,000 acres of timber damaged. 163 water systems damaged, with Asheville not having drinkable water for almost 2 months after the storm. Mr. President, when I was in Western North Carolina, I heard someone say that the one community that I was in was back on its feet. But for every community that's back on its feet, there's still several communities that are on its knees or flat on its back. In fact, there are some communities that we wonder whether or not they ever will come back. And the reason I talk about it, in addition to being the one-year anniversary, Mr. President, we've got real problems in the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund and resources available. The President rightfully acknowledged that there was a release of money about a month ago, but all of that is money that's already, those are reimbursements. Those are costs that have already been incurred. We haven't even gotten to a point to where we're trying to become more resilient or to prepare for the next storm. We're still, when I was riding from Old Fort to Chimney Rock, I was going down a stretch of highway, or not a stretch of highway, a stretch of state road. There are still cars in the creek beds. There are roads that are in the creek bed because they're trying to figure out where they're ultimately going to put it back on a hillside, when they can get stabilization there and actually have the funding to build the roads. I know a lot of people have moved on, Mr. President, but in Western North Carolina, we haven't moved on. We're suffering as much today as we were the day or 3 or 4 days after the storm last year. According to the latest FEMA Disaster Relief Fund monthly report, the major disasters account balance right now is at $1.4 billion. That is dangerously low. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a shutdown posture right now. We have storms in the Atlantic and more storms forming off the coast of Africa, and we are not prepared for another major disaster should it hit this weekend. Nor do we have the money that we need to help communities across this country, especially in Western North Carolina, recover from Helene. The House passed continuing resolution that we tried to vote on this week had $22.5 billion for the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund. But that money's not here today because we're in a shutdown posture. We're not funding any area of government, but we're especially hurting the Disaster Relief Fund and FEMA. And the only thing standing in our way is a simple vote to continue funding at levels that my Democratic colleagues have agreed to before. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a CR that the President or that the Majority Leader has decorated with ornaments. We call it like decorate some of these spending bills like a Christmas tree. This is a simple continuing resolution to spend at the level we were spending yesterday. There's nothing more to it. There's money in here to help with disaster relief, but there's nothing more. This shutdown is hurting people in North Carolina. This shutdown will hurt more people. When I lost the season last year in the tourist season to the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Great Smoky Mountain Parks, that was a hurricane. That was an inland hurricane, a disaster. This year, it's the disastrous vote of the Democrats not allowing us to continue to fund at the levels that we did yesterday. We're not asking for anything more than that. We're asking for time to negotiate the premium tax credits, the ACA credits that I'm on record as saying we do need to find a good place for that. It's not about canceling them. But folks, we can't even get to that if we can't agree to something as basic as can we spend today what we did yesterday? And I know that there are several members on the other side of the aisle that would like to move with a clean CR and get to that negotiation. And I'm just speaking on behalf of people in North Carolina, particularly Western North Carolina, that are struggling mightily. I hope that we can get back to funding the government, that we can plus up the disaster relief fund, and that I won't have to come to the floor next week to see who's going to be against this unanimous consent for doing just that. Let's do our job. Let's get back in business. Let's get the government funded, and let's help the people in North Carolina and dozens of disaster-declared places all across this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
President.
Senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, in July, when Republicans voted on the first spending bill for 2026, with cuts that would knock 15 million people off health care, I stood right here and I asked my Republican colleagues in the Senate to grow a spine and stand up for Americans. We are here today because the Republicans refused. Instead, Republicans bowed down to Trump, and now people all across this country will suffer. Let's be clear. Republicans shut down the government because they rather make health care more expensive than keep the government running. That is literally where we are right now. Republicans control the House, Republicans control the Senate, Republicans control the White House. They are in power. It is their job to keep the government running for the American people, and they have failed. Donald Trump and the Republicans own this shutdown. And don't take it from me. Listen to Donald J. Trump. In 2013, Trump himself said about a potential government shutdown, quote, "If there is a shutdown, I think it would be a tremendously negative mark on the President of the United States. He's the one that has to get people together." That's Donald J. Trump. Now, at the same time, Trump said, quote, "The president has to lead. You have to get people in a room, and you have to just make deals for the good of the country." Donald Trump today should listen to Donald Trump from yesterday. Instead, Trump, Mr. Art of the Deal,